40 years of war had carved scars into Ralvin's gray scales, but none ran deeper than the memories he carried. He stood at the entrance of the great assembly hall, watching 300 young cadets find their seats. They were eager, excited, completely unprepared for what the galaxy would throw at them. The Drethii veteran walked slowly to the center platform, his remaining 3 arms clasped behind his back. He had lost the 4th on a moon whose name he had tried to forget. The cadets grew quiet as he approached. His reputation was well known throughout the Coalition Academy. Today, Ralvin began, his deep voice filling the chamber. We discussed threat assessment. A few cadets exchanged bored glances. They had studied this subject for months. The Croton pack hunters, the Vilshan ambush predators, the Sketh raiders. Standard curriculum that every soldier memorized before their first deployment. Ralvin noticed their expressions and allowed himself a small, tired smile. I see some of you believe you already know everything about predators, he said. Let me ask you something. Who here has met a human? The hall went silent. 300 heads turned, looking at each other. Finally, 2 hands raised near the back. A young Fenari female named Pyra studied the 2 cadets who had raised their hands. Both of them looked uncomfortable. One was staring at the floor. Interesting, Ralvin continued. And what did you think of them? The first cadet, a bulky Gorvan male, shifted in his seat. They were smaller than I expected, instructor. Soft. Friendly. Friendly. Ralvin repeated the word like it was poison. Yes, they often are. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and a holographic image appeared above the platform. It showed a human. Just a male human, standing casually, wearing simple civilian clothes. He was smiling at whoever had taken the image. This species, Ralvin said quietly, was classified as passive when the Coalition first made contact with them. No natural weapons. No claws. No venom. Thin skin that tears easily. Slow runners compared to most galactic species. They cannot see in complete darkness. They cannot hear frequencies that many of us consider normal. He paused, letting the information sink in. Based on these facts, the Coalition welcomed humanity with open arms. We gave them minor trade routes, small colonies on unimportant worlds. We expected them to remain politically insignificant for centuries. Pyra raised her small, furred hand. Instructor, if humans are so limited, why are we discussing them in a threat assessment lecture? Ralvin looked at her with something that might have been approval. An excellent question, cadet. The answer is simple. We were wrong. Catastrophically, terrifyingly wrong. He changed the holographic display. Now it showed a planet, green and blue, with 3 moons orbiting it. This is New Brisbane. 32 years ago, it was a human colony of approximately 50,000 civilians. Farmers, mostly. Teachers. Merchants. Families building new lives on the frontier. The display shifted again, showing 3 massive warships in orbit. The Vreth Syndicate decided that New Brisbane would make an excellent addition to their territory. They sent 3 warships and 2,000 soldiers. A standard subjugation force. I was there as a Coalition observer, assigned to document the operation and ensure the Vreth followed proper protocols for civilian treatment. Ralvin's voice grew distant, as if he was no longer in the assembly hall, but somewhere far away, trapped in a memory he could not escape. The Vreth commander was named Galeth. He was experienced, confident. He had conquered 11 colonies before New Brisbane. He told me the operation would take 6 hours. The humans would surrender, we would process them for relocation, and the Syndicate would have another productive world. What happened? Someone called from the crowd. Ralvin turned off the holographic display. The hall fell into shadow. We landed in the capital city at midday. The streets were empty. Every building was silent. No bodies. No signs of evacuation. Nothing. Galeth laughed. He said the humans were cowards who had fled at the first sight of warships. He ordered his troops to spread out and search for survivors. The veterans' remaining hands tightened into fists. Then the power grid went dark. Every light in the city died at once. And somewhere in that darkness, something began to hunt. Pyra felt the fur on her neck stand up. Around her, 300 cadets sat frozen, barely breathing. In 4 hours, Ralvin said, his voice hollow, there were 11 Vreth soldiers still alive. 11 out of 2,000. The humans had not fled, cadets. They had prepared. He looked across the sea of young faces, seeing the fear beginning to bloom in their eyes. The coalition made a critical error in our assessment of humanity. We measured their claws and found none. We measured their speed and found it lacking. We measured their strength and dismissed them. But we forgot to measure the one thing that matters most. What is that, instructor? Piero whispered. Ralvin's scarred face twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. Their patience. Humans are the only species I have ever encountered that can hate something for years and never show it. They can smile at their enemy while planning destruction. They can seem weak while preparing strength. He pointed at the darkened display where the smiling human had stood moments before. This is the only species in 40 years of warfare that has ever made me run. Not because of what they are, cadets. Because of what they choose to be. Remember that word. Choose. We will return to it. The assembly hall remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Ralvin nodded slowly. Good. You are beginning to understand. Now let me tell you what happened in those 4 hours of darkness. Let me tell you what humans really are. Nobody in the assembly hall dared to cough. 300 cadets sat like statues while Ralvin gathered his thoughts. The old Drethii seemed smaller now, as if the weight of his memories was pressing him down. You must understand something about the Vreth, he began. They are not stupid. They are not careless. Their military had conquered dozens of worlds. Their soldiers trained for years before seeing combat. When they landed on New Brisbane, they expected resistance. They prepared for it. He activated the holographic display again. This time it showed a map of the colonial capital. Streets, buildings, the central plaza where the landing craft had touched down. Galith ordered standard formation. Squads of 20, spreading through the city in a grid pattern. Communication checks every 5 minutes. Thermal scanners to detect hidden civilians. Everything by the book. Piero watched the little dots on the map begin to move outward from the center. It looked organized, professional. The first squad vanished at 14 minutes. Ralvin said .1 cluster of dots on the map turned red, then disappeared. No distress call. No weapons fire. 20 soldiers simply stopped responding. Galith assumed technical failure. He sent a second squad to investigate. Another cluster moved toward the red zone. They found bodies. Some of them. A young cadet near the front made a small sound of distress. Ralvin ignored it. The Vreth have excellent night vision. Better than humans, we thought. But the colonists had done something clever. They had removed every reflective surface in the city. Every window was painted black. Every piece of metal was covered. The Vreth could see in darkness. Yes, but there was nothing to see. Just endless black corridors that led nowhere. The map shifted, showing thermal imagery now. Scattered heat signatures moving through buildings. The humans had also learned something about Vreth biology. Their species runs hot. Very hot. So the colonists had heated the buildings. Pipes filled with warm water running through every wall. Fires burning in sealed containers. The thermal scanners showed heat everywhere. The Vreth could not tell what was a human and what was a wall. Ralvin's voice dropped lower. And then the colonists began to hunt. He let the word hang in the air. Not attack. Not fight. Hunt. There is a difference, cadets. When you attack, you want victory. When you hunt, you want your prey to know it is being hunted. You want its fear. The display showed a recording now. Shaky helmet camera footage from a Vreth soldier. Dark corridors. Heavy breathing. The sound of footsteps that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The humans used every advantage their ancestors had developed over millions of years. They knew their city. Every building, every tunnel, every rooftop. They moved through paths the Vreth did not even know existed. And they were patient. On the recording, something moved in the shadows. The Vreth soldier spun, weapon raised. Nothing there. He turned back around. Still nothing. Then a sound from above. He looked up. The recording ended. Humans have a hunting technique, Ralvin continued. Their ancestors used it before they developed tools. They call it persistence predation. They do not need to be faster than their prey. They do not need to be stronger. They simply need to follow. To walk. To never stop. He looked at the cadets with his ancient, tired eyes. A human can walk for days. They sweat, which means they can regulate their body temperature better than almost any species. Their ancestors would chase animals across open plains, not to catch them, but to exhaust them. The prey would run, then rest. The human would walk. The prey would run again, then rest. The human would walk. Eventually, the prey could not run anymore. Pyra felt cold despite the warmth of the assembly hall. The Vreth soldiers began to tire. They had not slept. Every time they tried to rest, something would happen. A noise, a shadow, a squad that stopped responding. They were running, you see, and the humans were walking. The display showed the map again. Red dots appearing one by one. Squads disappearing. The formation breaking apart as soldiers panicked and fled in different directions. By the third hour, discipline had collapsed. Vreth soldiers were shooting at each other in the darkness. Some tried to reach the landing craft. They found it disabled. The colonists had sabotaged it during the initial chaos. Others tried to reach the warships in orbit. Their communications were jammed. Ralvin paused, his gaze distant. I watched a human woman kill a Vreth warrior that night. She was small, gray-haired, old by human standards. Perhaps a grandmother. The warrior was twice her size, armed, armored, trained. She had a farming tool, something for cutting grain. He touched the scar on his face absently. She did not attack him directly. She let him see her first. Let him chase her. Led him through corridors she knew, and he did not. He grew tired, frustrated, scared. By the time she finally turned to face him, he was exhausted and terrified. She was calm, patient. She had been doing this for hours and showed no signs of stopping. "How did you see this, instructor?" a cadet asked. Ralvin was quiet for a long moment. "I was hiding, cadet, in a storage room, behind containers of grain. The door was locked. I had my weapon ready, but I did not use it. I was not Vreth. I was not their enemy. But I hid anyway, because I had realized something that the Vreth commander had not." He turned to face the entire assembly. "Humans do not see predator and prey the way we do. They do not fight because they are hungry or threatened. They fight because they decide to fight. And once they decide, they do not stop until they are finished." The map showed only a handful of green dots now. 11 survivors, clustered in the central plaza, surrounded by red. On the third night, Commander Galeth walked into the open. He dropped his weapons. He dropped to his knees. And he surrendered to a species his military had classified as passive. Ralvin turned off the display. That was when I truly became afraid. Not because of the killing. I had seen killing before. I became afraid because of what happened next. The silence in the assembly hall was so complete that Pyra could hear her own heartbeat. She watched Instructor Ralvin standing alone on the platform, his scales looking gray and old under the dim lights. He seemed lost in time, standing not in the academy but in the darkness of New Brisbane. Galeth was on his knees. Ralvin continued, his voice soft. His armor was scratched and dented. His eyes were wide with terror. He had not slept in 3 days. He kept looking at the shadows, waiting for something to emerge and kill him. The veteran began to walk slowly across the platform. The humans came out of the darkness. Not running, not shouting. They simply appeared, one by one, from doorways and rooftops and streets. Men, women, young, old. They carried weapons, yes, but most of those weapons were improvised. Tools, kitchen implements, sports equipment. One man held a metal pipe with cloth wrapped around one end. He stopped walking. They surrounded the 11 survivors. They could have killed them in seconds. After everything the Vreth had tried to do to their colony, no one would have blamed them. I certainly would not have blamed them. A cadet raised his hand. "But they did not kill them." "No," Ralvin said. "They did not." He turned to face the young soldier who had asked the question. "They treated the wounded." The Vreth soldiers who had injuries received medical care from human doctors. The same doctors whose hospital the Vreth had planned to convert into a processing center for slaves. The same doctors whose families had hidden in basements while invaders walked their streets. Pyra felt confused. "Instructor, I do not understand. Why would they help their enemies?" "Because they chose to," Ralvin answered. "That is the part you must understand, cadet. That is the part that keeps me awake at night, even after all these years." He activated the display again. It showed the 11 Vreth survivors being escorted to a building. Human guards surrounded them, but the guards were not threatening. They were protecting. The colonists fed the prisoners, gave them water, let them sleep in actual beds with actual blankets. Commander Galeth kept waiting for the torture to begin, for the revenge. It never came. "They just let them go?" someone asked in disbelief. "Eventually, yes. But first, they delivered a message." The colonial governor was a man named Samuel Reeves. Farmer, father of 3. His youngest daughter had been killed during the initial landing when a Vreth soldier fired at movement in a window. Ralvin let that information settle into the room. Governor Reeves walked up to Commander Galeth. He looked the Vreth directly in his eyes. And he said, "Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them we did not want this. Tell them we will not start wars. But we will finish them." The display showed the recording of this moment. A middle-aged human, dirt and blood on his clothes, speaking calmly to an alien warrior twice his size. There was no anger in his voice. No hatred. Just absolute certainty. Galeth asked why. Why help them? Why spare them? Why not take revenge for the daughter who died? Ralvin's voice dropped even lower. Reeves said, "Because killing you would not bring her back. And because I want you to live with what you saw here. I want you to remember that farmers and teachers destroyed your army. I want you to tell your leaders that this is what happens when you threaten our homes. Not because we are strong, because we refuse to lose." The assembly hall was completely silent. 300 young soldiers sat frozen, processing what they had heard. The survivors were returned to Vreth space in a transport. They delivered the message. Within 1 year, the Vreth Syndicate signed a non-aggression treaty with humanity. They have not violated it once in 3 decades. Pyra raised her hand slowly. "Instructor, you said this was when you became truly afraid. But the humans showed mercy. They showed compassion. Those are not frightening qualities." Ralvin nodded, as if he had expected this question. "Tell me, Cadet, when a Croton kills, what does it feel? Hunger? Instinct? Nothing personal. When a Vilshan ambushes prey, what drives it? Survival? Biology? Predictable patterns that we can study and understand." He walked toward Pyra, his remaining 3 arms spread wide. But humans? The colonists of New Brisbane were angry. They were grieving. They had lost friends and family. They had spent 3 days hunting their enemies through darkness. And at the end of it, they chose mercy. They chose compassion. Do you understand how much more terrifying that is? Pyra shook her head. It means their violence is not instinct. It is decision. They can turn it on and off like a switch. The same hands that killed 2,000 soldiers treated the wounds of the survivors. The same hearts that hunted without rest chose to forgive. They contain both extremes, Cadet, and they move between them based on nothing but their own will. He leaned closer to her. "I can predict a predator. I cannot predict a human. I do not know if the next one I meet will offer me dinner or bury me in an unmarked grave. And the worst part? Neither does the human. They decide in the moment. They are capable of anything." Ralvin straightened and addressed the entire assembly. Since first contact, 14 species have initiated military conflict with humanity. Do you know how many have attacked them twice? He held up a closed fist, showing 0 fingers. None, because every single one of those species learned what the Vreth learned. Humans do not bluff. Humans do not threaten. Humans simply do what they decide to do, and then they offer you a choice, peace or extinction. He turned off the display. But New Brisbane was not the event that truly convinced me of what humans are. That came later. That came when I saw what they do for creatures they love. A hand shot up from the middle of the assembly hall. The cadet was a Gorvin, young and broad, with the typical overconfidence of his species. "Instructor, permission to speak freely?" Ralvin nodded. "This seems exaggerated. 1 colony against 2,000 trained soldiers? It sounds like propaganda designed to make us fear an ally." Some of the other cadets nodded in agreement. The fear that had gripped the room was fading, replaced by skepticism. Young minds always looked for reasons to dismiss uncomfortable truths. Ralvin did not seem offended. He walked slowly toward the questioning cadet, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. "What is your name, cadet?" "Borvin, sir." "Borvin, tell me, have you studied the military history of Earth?" "Their homeworld." The young Gorvin shook his head. Humans have been fighting wars for their entire recorded history. Thousands of years of conflict. They have developed combat techniques, strategies, and psychological operations that most species cannot even imagine. And all of this was done against other humans. Ralvin stopped directly in front of Borvin. They fought each other because they had no other enemies. Their planet had no other intelligent species. So for millions of years, the greatest threat to a human was another human. They evolved not to fight animals or aliens. They evolved to fight themselves. The skepticism on Borvin's face began to fade. Every trick they used on New Brisbane was developed over centuries of human conflict. Guerrilla warfare, psychological pressure, exhaustion tactics, using terrain, removing enemy advantages. These were not desperate improvisations. They were inherited knowledge, passed down through generations of survivors. Ralvin turned away from Borvin and addressed the room. You think humans are soft because they smile at you. You think they are weak because they do not have claws. You are making the same mistake that every conquered species has made. You are judging them by what you see, not by what they are. He activated the display again. This time it showed statistics, numbers and charts that filled the air with cold data. Coalition combat analysis from the past 30 years. 14 species have engaged humanity in military conflict. 0 have attacked twice. Combined enemy casualties exceed 12 million. Human casualties in these conflicts number approximately 80,000. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. Humanity has never initiated a war. They have never fired the first shot. But they have never lost a conflict either. Not once. Not even against species with superior technology, superior numbers, or superior natural abilities. A small voice came from the back of the hall. How is that possible? Because humans do not fight wars the way we do, Ralvin answered. We fight to win. They fight to end. There is a difference. He changed the display to show battle footage. Ships exploding. Ground combat. The chaos of interstellar warfare. When the coalition engages an enemy, we seek to defeat their military and negotiate surrender. Clean. Professional. Minimize casualties on both sides. That is how civilized species conduct warfare. The footage changed. Different battles. Different outcomes. When humans engage an enemy, they seek to remove the threat permanently. Not just the military, the infrastructure, the leadership, the capacity to ever attack again. They do not want victory. They want the war to never happen again. Piera felt sick watching the footage. She had seen combat simulations, training exercises. This was different. This was real. After New Brisbane, the Vreth Syndicate did not simply sign a treaty and continue as before. Their military was reorganized. Their leadership was changed. Human advisors were embedded in their government to ensure compliance. The humans did not want revenge. They wanted prevention. Ralvin turned off the display. And yet, despite all of this, despite their capacity for total war, humans remain the coalition's most valued allies. Do you know why? No one answered. Because they are just as good at peace as they are at war. They have rebuilt worlds they conquered. They have shared technology freely with former enemies. They have adopted orphans from species that attack them. The same creatures who can destroy entire civilizations can also love unconditionally. He walked back to the center of the platform. I told you about choice earlier. This is what I meant. Humans contain multitudes. They can be the greatest friends you will ever have or the last thing you will ever see. And the only thing that determines which version you meet is how you treat them. Admiral Sun, who had been watching silently from the back of the hall, stepped forward. Instructor Ralvin, I appreciate the history lesson, but I am concerned about the message you are sending these cadets. We are allies with humanity. Perhaps we should focus on cooperation rather than fear. Ralvin looked at the Admiral with something close to pity. Admiral, with respect, you have never seen humans in combat. You have never watched them hunt. You have never seen the look in their eyes when someone threatens what they love. He touched the stump where his fourth arm should have been. I have. And I am not trying to make these cadets fear humans. I am trying to make them understand that our alliance is precious. Because if it ever breaks, if we ever become enemies, there will be no second chances. No surrender. No mercy. He looked at the young soldiers watching him. Humans offer two options to every species they meet: friendship or war. Choose friendship. Always choose friendship. The Admiral frowned, but said nothing more. Now, Ralvin continued, let me tell you about a human named David. And let me show you what happens when a human decides that something is worth protecting. 15 years after New Brisbane, Ralvin found himself commanding a patrol ship on the Outer Rim. It was quiet duty, mostly checking cargo transports and responding to minor incidents. He had accepted the assignment because he wanted peace. After what he had witnessed on that colony world, he needed time away from violence. The distress signal came on a cold morning. A passenger liner, Ralvin told the cadets. The Gentle Horizon. 3,000 passengers traveling from the inner colonies to a new settlement. Families, workers, children. He activated the display. It showed a damaged ship, hull breached in multiple places, drifting in the void between systems. Sketh raiders had hit them hard. The Sketh are slavers, as most of you know. They do not kill if they can avoid it. Living cargo is worth more than dead cargo. The display zoomed in on the ship's layout. By the time my patrol arrived, the Sketh had already taken most of the passengers. They were loading them onto transport pods, preparing to jump to their hidden bases. We engaged immediately, but we were one ship against 4. All we could do was slow them down. Ralvin pointed to a section of the liner that still showed life signs. This was the children's quarters, a sealed section near the center of the ship, designed to be the safest area during emergencies. 43 children from a dozen different species, ages ranging from 3 to 12 standard years, and 1 human adult. The display showed security footage. A corridor filled with smoke and debris. Dead Sketh bodies scattered across the floor. And standing in front of a sealed door, barely able to remain upright, was a human male. His name was David. He was 42 years old. A teacher. He specialized in early childhood education. He had no military training, no combat experience. He had never held a weapon before that day. The footage showed David in detail. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle. Burns covered his chest and neck. His clothes were torn and stained with blood, some of it blue from the Sketh he had killed. In his right hand, he gripped a metal pipe wrapped in cloth. The Sketh had been trying to breach that door for 6 hours. 6 hours, cadets. They sent wave after wave of soldiers. They used cutting tools, explosives, biological agents. Nothing worked. Ralvin's voice filled with something that might have been awe, because David would not move. Every time they tried to approach, he was there, bleeding, broken, but there. He had barricaded himself in the corridor and turned it into a killing ground. Every piece of furniture was a weapon. Every corner was a trap. The Sketh could not get past him. Pyra stared at the footage. 1 human? Against trained soldiers? 12 dead Sketh in that corridor alone, Ralvin confirmed. More in the surrounding sections. He had been awake for almost 2 days. He had not eaten. His injuries should have killed him. But every time the Sketh thought he was finished, he stood back up. The display showed Ralvin's team arriving. Coalition soldiers in full armor, weapons ready, moving through the damaged ship. They reached David's corridor and stopped. My tactical officer said we should sedate him and take him to medical immediately. I agreed. But when we approached, David raised his weapon. He looked at us with eyes that had no recognition. He did not know we were allies. He only knew that something was trying to reach the door behind him. Ralvin touched his chest, where an old scar was hidden under his uniform. He nearly killed one of my soldiers before we could calm him down. Even then, he refused to leave his position until every single child was safely aboard my ship. We had to carry them out one by one while he watched. Counted. Made sure none were missing. The footage showed the children being evacuated. Small, frightened faces from a dozen species. They clung to the coalition soldiers, crying for parents who had been taken. The last image showed David finally collapsing as the final child was confirmed safe. He survived. Barely. The doctors said he should have died from blood loss alone, let alone the burns and broken bones. They asked him how he had managed to fight for so long. Do you know what he said? The cadets shook their heads. He said, they were kids. What else was I supposed to do? Ralvin let the words hang in the air. This is what humans call pack bonding. They form connections with other creatures, sometimes within minutes of meeting them. And once that bond is formed, there is no force in the galaxy that can make them abandon it. David did not know those children. He had only met them days before, when the voyage began. But they were his students, his responsibility, his pack. He looked at Pyra directly. If a human calls you friend, cadet, you have gained the most dangerous guardian in the galaxy. They will fight for you, bleed for you, die for you. Not because of duty or honor or reward, because that is what humans do for things they love. The display showed one final image. David, weeks later, recovered from his injuries, surrounded by the children he had saved. They were hugging him, climbing on him, showing him drawings they had made. He was smiling. Every single Sketh on that station died, Ralvin said quietly. My team killed most of them. David killed the rest. And when it was over, when the blood was cleaned and the bodies were removed, he went right back to teaching. Art class, I believe. Finger painting. He turned off the display. That is what humans are. That is why I warn you about them. Not because they are monsters, because they are everything. Heroes and killers, teachers and warriors. And they switch between these roles as easily as breathing. The lecture hall lights returned to full brightness. Ralvin stood in the center of the platform, looking older than he had at the start of the session. The memories had cost him something to share. They always did. "Let me summarize what I have taught you today," he said. "Because one day, these lessons may save your life." He raised one finger. "First, never classify humans by their appearance. They are small. They are soft. They have no natural weapons. None of this matters. What matters is what they contain inside. Determination, creativity, patience. These are the weapons that conquered their world long before they reached the stars." A second finger rose. "Second, never mistake their kindness for weakness. Humans smile at everyone. They help strangers. They adopt creatures from other species and treat them as family. This compassion is real. It is also a choice. They can turn it off. And when they do, there is nothing left but the predator." Third finger. Third, never threaten what they have claimed as theirs. Their families, their friends, their homes, their students, their pets. Anything that a human has decided belongs to them is protected by every instinct their species has developed over millions of years. Attack these things, and you will learn what apex predator truly means. Fourth finger, from his remaining hand. Fourth, never assume you have seen their limits. You have not. Every time the galaxy has underestimated humanity, humanity has exceeded our expectations. They are capable of things that no other species has achieved, simply because they refuse to accept defeat. He lowered his hand. Humans are now the coalition's most valued allies. Not because they are the strongest, not because they have the best technology, because they choose to be our allies. And they honor that choice absolutely. Ralvin walked to the edge of the platform. When humanity joined the coalition, they asked for only one thing. They did not demand territory or resources or power. They asked that we never require them to abandon those who cannot protect themselves. That is the core of their nature. Protectors, guardians. They cannot help it. Cadet Pyra raised her hand one final time. "Instructor, you said that you ran from the humans on New Brisbane. You never explained when. What made you run?" Ralvin was quiet for a long moment. The other cadets leaned forward, waiting for the answer to the question that had been building all lecture. "It was after the surrender," he said finally. "After the violence had ended. I came out of hiding and walked through the streets of the colony. The sun was rising. Humans were cleaning up, washing blood from the walls, carrying bodies, rebuilding what the Vreth had damaged." He touched the scar on his face. "And I saw a child, a human girl, perhaps 7 years old. She was sitting in the middle of the street, playing with a toy. A small stuffed animal, I think. She was laughing. Her parents were nearby, scrubbing blue blood from the pavement." His voice became almost a whisper. "She saw me watching her. She waved at me, smiled, then went back to playing, as if nothing had happened, as if 2,000 soldiers had not died in those streets, as if her species had not just performed the most efficient massacre I had ever witnessed." He looked at Pyra. "That was when I understood. Humans process violence the way we process weather. It happens. They adapt. They continue. There is no lasting trauma, no permanent change. They simply reset and move forward, ready for the next threat, ready to smile at strangers and wave at aliens and then, if necessary, kill again." Ralvin stepped back from the edge of the platform. "That is when I ran. Not from their violence, from their normalcy. Because I realized that this species could do terrible things and then have breakfast. They could burn worlds and then teach their children to read. They are not broken by war. They are built for it." The lecture hall was completely silent. 300 cadets sat with new understanding in their eyes. Some looked frightened. Some looked thoughtful. Some looked at their human classmates, if they had any, with fresh perspective. "Class dismissed," Ralvin said. "Remember what I have taught you. Be grateful that humanity is our friend, and pray that we never give them a reason to become anything else." The cadets began to file out slowly, whispering among themselves. Pyra remained seated, processing everything she had heard. Ralvin noticed her and walked over. "You have questions, cadet?" "Just one, instructor. Should I be afraid of humans?" The old veteran looked at her with tired eyes that had seen too much. "No, cadet. You should be grateful. Because somewhere out there, a A human has probably already decided you are worth protecting. Maybe it happened when you smiled at one in the corridor. Maybe it happened when you helped one carry their equipment. These things are enough for them. And once they decide you are theirs, nothing in this galaxy can touch you. Pyra nodded slowly and stood to leave. Ralvin watched her go, then turned to look at the empty hall. He flexed his remaining 3 arms, feeling the phantom pain of the fourth. Besides, he muttered to himself, it is the ones who have not met humans yet that should be afraid. He gathered his materials and walked toward the exit. Tomorrow there would be another class. Another group of young soldiers who needed to understand what moved among the stars. And in the quiet of the empty hall, Ralvin allowed himself a small smile. 40 years ago, a species had terrified him into running. Now he taught their lessons to young soldiers who would carry them forward. The humans would appreciate that, he thought. They loved stories.